The 7 Causes of Caregiver Guilt, written by Peter Mangiola, narrated by Troy McElfresh. Foreword by Roseanne Vanilla, founder of Family Affairs. Caregiving is something I have had both the fortune and misfortune of experiencing firsthand from the time I was a young girl. I grew up in a very Italian-American family. All of us lived on the same block, so to say we were close would be accurate. Parents, children, aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, and even great-grandparents were just a backyard away. I consider myself both lucky and unlucky to have had both experiences. It had a definite and direct impact in shaping my future, in becoming a professional family mediator and a community advocate for a global online community, being able to help families through these difficult life changes. It also gave me lifelong lessons on what caregiving truly is and how it can both be the hardest job in the world, but yet the most rewarding. This is why I say that I have been both lucky and unlucky. In order to find the rewarding part of caregiving, we have to go through a long period of suffering, which may include confusion, self-doubt, and guilt. When I was a young girl, there were no senior experts or much assistance in the aging area. Someone with dementia or Alzheimer's were simply said to be senile, and families were left on what seemed to be a deserted island to simply try and figure it all out. Figure out not only how to care for our aged loved ones, but also struggle with the variety of emotions that were unleashed from inside us. With advances in medicine, life expectancy extension, and an ever-growing population of seniors, there's more information than ever before. The problem now is that everyone seems to be jumping on this bandwagon of experts in the aging industry, and it's difficult to distinguish who is an expert and who is in the mix solely for financial gain in this multi-billion-dollar market. Since I am tightly connected to the senior care industry, I consider myself very fortunate to have access to individuals who are the best in their field. Peter Mangiola is definitely one of those people who is a treasure trove of knowledge and experience in the sea of caregiving and aging experts. Peter's professional knowledge, personal experience in caregiving, and breadth of resources throughout the aging community makes him the absolute best. I've referred to Peter as a professional resource as well as for personal advice for my caregiving needs, as I know he will have the answer. Peter truly understands what caregivers experience and gives practical advice to not only help us survive, but also so we and our loved ones can thrive in this difficult journey. Roseanne Vanilla is the president of Advanced Mediation Solutions, a firm providing family mediation services. She is also a community advocate and family expert for FamilyAffairs.com, an online resource for families dealing with life changes. Roseanne is a frequent expert and guest on TV, radio, and has been quoted in the Huffington Post and other publications. She speaks both nationally and globally on family issues and is passionate about sharing her knowledge in order to educate the public. Roseanne Vanilla, community advocate and publisher, FamilyAffairs.com, 856-669-4974. Roseanne at FamilyAffairs.com. Introduction. Senior citizens have become the largest and fastest-growing segment of the U.S. population, a demographic shift that influences everything from consumer behavior to healthcare cost, according to this census release, The Wall Street Journal. Why I needed this book, and why you need this book too. Unfortunately, most people act as if change is the exception and not the rule, when the exact opposite is true. When we're young, change represents new opportunities and new growth. As we get older, change represents less opportunity and more restrictions. But we all know that it isn't what you have, but what you do with what you have that makes all the difference in the world. Some people feel that guilt, especially the guilt that comes to most caregivers, is inevitable. We may all acknowledge that guilt is a form of pain, and more than anything else, pain is initially intended to be a warning, not a result. The same is true for guilt. The message that guilt should bring is that there was a failure of the individual to properly anticipate or plan for the caregiving responsibilities they had undertaken. And guilt can also be the evidence of unrealistic expectations. Guilt can also reflect one's personal policy of complacency or procrastination. Either way, guilt is preventable whether by preparation, education, or anticipation. By understanding these 7 causes of caregiver guilt, we hope and believe that by applying the principles we will present to you, you will live a more productive and guilt-free life as you care for your elder relatives, parents, or friends. You will not only learn the causes of the guilt, but 5 disciplines that will make caregiving more rewarding and less of a burden. We will also cover the secrets to caregiving psychology. This is a story that we believe will deliver a happier ending. Peter Mangiola. What is guilt? Before discussing elder care guilt and how to overcome it, it is helpful to delve into the definition of guilt and how it deceptively takes control of your life. If you are a caregiver, you are likely an other-centered person that is highly responsive to the needs of those around you while paying scant attention to your own needs. Clearly, selflessness is a great quality to have, and the world needs more people like you. But there is a downside. Selfless people are highly susceptible to being manipulated by those around them. And one of the most effective ways to manipulate others to get their own way is by making them feel guilty. Most of us experience guilt at least occasionally in our dealings with others. It is the emotion we feel when we believe we have done something wrong. It is that nagging feeling that whatever we do is not good enough, that no matter how hard we try to please that person we are caring for, our efforts just don't measure up. It may have started because those you are responsible for verbally complained about all that was wrong while scarcely showing appreciation for the 99% of the time that your efforts were spot on or went above and beyond the call of duty. Now maybe it's gotten to the point where no one has to say anything. Your conscience, or more accurately your inner critic, now does all the talking. Famous 20th century psychologist Sigmund Freud espoused the theory that our psyche is essentially made up of 3 primary characters: the id, the ego, and the superego. The id is like the inner child in us, the part of us that is completely self-centered and seeks to satisfy its desires whatever the cost. The superego is the critical and judgmental character that likes to throw cold water on everything and seeks to rule over the id. The ego is the adult in the room, so to speak, the rational and reasonable character that carefully examines the arguments of the id and the superego and mediates between the two before seeking to arrive at a decision that satisfies all parties. Freud posited that because we live in an imperfect world, humans do not have a perfect balance of the 3 characters. For some, the id is in charge well into adulthood. These are people that essentially never grew up and live their lives as adult children, always looking for what they can gain out of a situation, with little regard for the feelings of others. If the ego is in charge, this is the person that thinks through each situation and carefully plans each part of their lives. These traits can bring success in certain areas of life, but there is often a lack of playfulness and spontaneity. This person is likely to be working a lot and is reluctant to go on vacation. When the superego is in charge, the person may possess some of the same traits as the ego, but with an irrationally harsh and judgmental spirit. For people in this category, nothing is ever good enough because their superego is constantly accusing. Guilt is just a regular part of their lives, and often they have no idea where it originates from. Freud's theory may or may not be completely accurate, but nonetheless, it is a good illustration of the inner conflicts of the human psyche and why some people experience guilt more than others. Guilt is not always bad. It is important to realize that guilt, like every emotion, has a good intent. Guilt is a part of our conscience, which was given to us so we can distinguish between right and wrong. A calloused conscience, where guilt is lacking, can be just as bad, or worse, than an overly active conscience, because it can cause us to do horrible things with little or no remorse. So an important thing to understand is that feelings of guilt do have their place, and it is not necessarily a bad thing to feel guilty about a situation. Here are some examples of how positive guilt can make us better. It compels us to think about others' needs ahead of our own. It encourages us to show compassion for those around us. It encourages us to perform courageous acts on behalf of others. It compels us to be responsible for our own actions. It encourages us to delay gratification and show restraint in our actions. It compels us to be more loyal, honest, and faithful to those around us. How negative guilt controls us. Most caregivers do not have a problem with lack of guilt. To the contrary, it is excessive guilt that causes strain on relationships and becomes that self-accuser that pulls us down and leads to feelings of low self-worth. And with that cloud of guilt hanging over us, we are unable to experience the love, joy, peace, and harmony we were meant to experience with those closest to us. Here's an example. Do you feel like the weight of the world is on your shoulders, and anything that goes wrong is your fault? Even things you had nothing to do with, and/or are beyond your control. If this describes you, then your guilt has gotten a hold of you, to the point that it has taken over nearly every area of your life. To break free of the stress of your situation, you must break free of the negative guilt that is controlling you. Here are some of the ways negative guilt controls us. It causes us to place the blame for everything on ourselves. It compels us to give tirelessly, without ever allowing ourselves to receive something from others. It burdens us with the task of doing it all. It encourages self-doubt. It makes us feel responsible, even when we are victims. It causes us to lie to ourselves and become blind to the reality around us. Ultimately, we become prisoners to the cycle of guilt. Now that we have a better idea of what guilt is, in both positive and negative forms, let's look at how it plays out for elder caregivers during the holidays. These issues can actually occur any time during the year, but I have found that the stress of the holidays often causes them to boil over. Dealing with elder care guilt during the holidays, Part 1, Anger. As parents age, there are inevitably going to be changes in the way they relate to the rest of the family. Often this is by necessity. Aging seniors will need an increasing level of care, and most often in today's society, the children are unable to provide this on their own. This leaves them with the option of either placing their parent in a nursing home or assisted living center, or hiring an in-home caregiver. In-home senior care is usually the best choice for maintaining the optimal quality of life for the parent, as well as minimizing cost. However, even this option is wrought with misunderstandings and misinterpretations that can put a lot of stress on the relationship. And this stress is all too often manifested during what should be the most festive times of the year: Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, Mother's Day, Father's Day, birthdays, and other holidays and special occasions. In this 7-part series, we are going to be examining the 7 causes of elder care guilt, symptoms of each one, and how to overcome these issues so you can once again enjoy the most special days of the year with your aging loved ones. Anger. A very common emotion when seniors begin the transition into their golden years is anger. Seniors tend to be angry because they can no longer take care of themselves the way they once could, and even if they are fortunate enough to remain in their homes, They now have to deal with this outside caregiver coming in every week or every day. This type of change can be very upsetting, causing angry words to fly, but these words are more often directed at the children rather than the caregiver. The source of anger is usually a deep-seated feeling they don't always even know they have, that the children no longer care about them because they passed me off on some caregiver. As we know in our day-to-day lives, anger is contagious. When the angry words start coming from the parents, the children often respond in kind. The children are offended because they are usually at least partially responsible financially for their parents' care. This makes them feel unappreciated, prompting them to yell back at the parent. To diffuse the anger in the relationship, the children most often need to take the lead. Essentially, they now need to be the adult in the relationship and understand what's really happening. In other words, the children must understand that this anger is a result of the changes their parent is going through, and not to take it personally. Most of all, they need to be prepared for these situations and ready to respond with compassion and understanding. That is not to say you cannot have disagreements or spirited debates with your parents, just that you should adopt a softer tone in doing so. To borrow a quote from the world's all-time best-selling book, "A soft answer turns away wrath." Proverbs 15:1. Dealing with elder care guilt during the holidays, Part 2, Frustration. The second cause of elder care guilt is an emotion that is closely related to anger, known as frustration. Aging parents become frustrated for a number of reasons. 1. Things are changing too fast. For seniors that have recently entered retirement, their world totally changed the day they left their job. Suddenly, they are no longer working, which for many is a major source of significance. In fact, a major part of a person's identity is wrapped up in what they do for a living. When that is suddenly gone, they not only have a lot more time on their hands, but they often have a hard time figuring out what to do with their time. Another big change when someone retires is they lose a big part of their social network. Sure, their coworkers will promise to keep in touch, but how often does that really happen? So many changes in so short a time can lead to many frustrations. 2. Things aren't what they expected. On the flip side, some seniors have been looking forward to retirement with anticipation of having lots of free time to travel, enjoy life, and start putting a major dent into their bucket list. Then something unexpected happens. They lose their spouse, develop a serious health condition, etc., and suddenly their dreams of the ideal retirement have evaporated. 3. They can no longer do the things they once did. This is a big one. Loss of functionality, even in minor areas, means loss of freedom and dependence on others for day-to-day living. Not being able to do what they want when they want to is a constant source of frustration. 4. Caregiving role reversal. When the adult becomes the caregiver for the parent, this can often have a deep psychological effect on the parent. The fact that they are now being taken care of by the person they once cared for can be a hard pill to swallow. Adult children become quite frustrated as their parents age for many of the same reasons. It is not easy seeing the person who raised you start to lose their independence. Also, because parents sometimes tend to be intentionally difficult, when a child is trying to administer care, the child often becomes stressed out in a hurry. The frustration between the parent and children are rooted in the fact that there is a long-term history between the two. The frustration between the parents and children are rooted in the fact that there is a long-term history between the two. There are set patterns and ways you relate to each other, both positive and negative. The major changes that accompany retirement upset these patterns and cause everyone involved to become frustrated. The best way to overcome this is by knowing what to expect ahead of time. Have a discussion with your parents about these changes before they occur en masse. It is helpful to speak with others who have been through what you're going through, or to speak with an outside expert such as a geriatric care manager. Geriatric care managers are specialists that can counsel you on the big picture of what to expect as your parents enter their golden years and what resources are available to help you through this transitional process. Dealing with elder care guilt during the holidays, Part 3, Anxiety. Anxiety is another common cause of elder care guilt that is prevalent in many aging seniors. It is only natural that sudden changes in a person's life can lead to them becoming anxious about the future. We see this happen in nearly every stage of life. Children, when they enter middle school and become adolescents, are anxious about how they look and what others think of them. High school students entering college are anxious about leaving home for the first time, leaving their friends, and increased demands of going to college. College graduates are anxious about entering the workforce for the first time and being truly on their own. Then, once in the workforce, moves and job changes make people anxious about their new situations. One adult children often fail to consider is that seniors have the same or greater level of anxiety about entering their retirement years. At the root of it is the uncertainty about what the future holds. There are a lot of unanswered questions, such as 1. Where am I going to live? 2. Who is going to take care of me? 3. Will I outlive my spouse, or will they outlive me? 4. What kind of health issues will I have to deal with? 5. Will my children ever call or visit me anymore? Sometimes this anxiety is a normal part of the aging process and can often be successfully addressed through proper preparation and providing as definite an answer as possible to the nagging questions parents have. As mentioned earlier, this can be done by speaking with others that have had similar issues, or with a geriatric care manager about the big picture around the aging process. However, this could also be a sign of an anxiety disorder. According to the National Institute of Health, there are 6 types of anxiety disorders: generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, social phobia, obsessive-compulsive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, various specific phobias. Among seniors with anxiety disorders, 90% are either generalized anxiety disorder or specific phobias. Anxiety disorders are difficult to diagnose with seniors, but it is estimated that they occur in up to 20% of the aging seniors and are twice as common as dementia. Here are some signs to look for to determine if your aging loved one may be suffering from an anxiety disorder. Excessive worry about day-to-day matters. Excessive preoccupation with their daily routine. Excessive preoccupation with safety. Difficulty sleeping at night. Frequent sweating, nausea, or breathing problems. Fear of social situations. Excessive use of alcohol or medications. Depression. If your loved one is showing one or more of the above symptoms, or you have strong reason to believe that he or she may have an anxiety disorder, seek medical treatment right away. Treatment may involve some type of medication, a type of psychotherapy, such as cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, or combination of these. Every situation is different, so the important thing is to speak to a specialist right away before the problem becomes worse. Dealing with elder care guilt during the holidays, Part 4, Fear. The 4th common cause of elder care guilt is fear. Fear is an emotion that ties in quite closely with anxiety and has to do with how anxiety manifests itself. When seniors get anxious, they begin to fear many of the unknowns of their new normal. As mentioned earlier in the discussion about anxiety, if your parents have an anxiety disorder, it needs to be addressed medically. If they are just experiencing some of the typical fears of entering a new situation, then these can be alleviated with greater discussion and answers to their questions. Here are some of the common fears seniors have around adjusting to life after retirement and ways to address each. 1. Aging and disease. The elderly have seen it happen more than anyone else, the health of their parents and grandparents gradually deteriorating as they age, and sometimes it's not so gradual. Major healthcare problems can occur literally overnight in some cases. Not knowing what illness will eventually lead to their demise, or when, will naturally strike a certain level of fear into even the bravest among us. The cure for this fear is information, knowing what health conditions are likely in the future, and having a proactive treatment plan ready and in place. It also helps to counsel the senior on how these future conditions will impact their daily lives so they know what to expect. 2. Having too much time on their hands. With their work life over and health in decline, another natural fear is just being bored. No one wants to spend their golden years sitting around watching TV, but if they can't travel much because of health concerns, it can be hard to find ways to occupy their time. The best thing for retirees to do is stay as active as possible. Getting together regularly with other seniors or doing volunteer work are good ways to keep from being bored. 3. My family and friends will neglect me. Again, many seniors have seen this happen with their own parents or grandparents. They move out of their home and go into a nursing home, and after a while, no one calls or visits them anymore. Adult children can alleviate this worry by scheduling regular times for weekly visits. Whether they are in a nursing facility or receiving in-home care, regular calls and visits from children are critical to maintaining the quality of this precious relationship. 4. All my life savings will be spent. Definitely a common worry for seniors is outliving their money. They hope they have saved enough to enjoy their retirement, but the cost associated with elder care can take a big bite out of their nest egg. The best way to handle this is to speak with a financial planner with expertise about budgeting for senior care and other related expenses. Often you will find that in-home care is among the most cost-effective options. But whichever direction you go, it helps to know ahead of time what to expect. Ultimately, the fear seniors have is rooted in loss of control, independence. For the children, there is fear of how they will deal with their parents' decline, and the financial fear, as they think they may have to foot part or all of the cost of care. Proper counseling ahead of time helps quell these fears and put everyone on the same page. Dealing with Elder Care Guilt during the holidays, Part 5, Lack of Information. Without a plan of action around the elder care, the family is planning to fail, and without the information and resources needed to put together an effective plan, the anger, frustration, anxiety, and fear will be multiplied. You may have heard of the 80-20 rule, which is applied in many ways and in varying contexts. When it comes to senior care, a different rule applies, the 40-70 rule. The essence of the 40-70 rule is that when an adult is at or approaching the age of 40, they are highly likely to have at least one parent that is at or approaching the age of 70, and at age 70, the parent is probably recently retired and starting to show, at the very least, early signs of a decline in health. It is at this stage that discussion should be had about elder care and end-of-life issues. To be sure, these are difficult conversations to have, but not having these conversations is far worse, because it guarantees that you will be continually in reactionary mode, constantly scrambling to react to continually changing circumstances, without having a clear plan in place, or even knowing what the end result should be. The Elder Care Assessment. The 40-70 stage is the ideal time to go in for an elder care assessment with a geriatric care manager. This is a comprehensive assessment, taking a holistic approach that examines every aspect of life after age 70. The assessment begins by gathering as much information as possible about the senior. This includes medical history, current medications and dosages, medical devices used, pacemaker, hearing aids, etc., doctors and insurance plans, financial information, activities and interest, and much more. The assessment will evaluate the senior's overall physical, mental, social, financial, and spiritual health, and the result will form the basis for a customized healthcare plan. I recognize that it's not always easy to convince an aging parent to submit to a geriatric care assessment. Though not always the case, there may be resistance because of issues mentioned earlier, such as fear and anxiety. The senior is often afraid that the children and the GCM are conspiring to take away their freedom, or some similar concern. This is why it's important to discuss beforehand how they will benefit from a geriatric care assessment. Communicate to them as clearly as you can that you are on their side and you want what's best for them. It is also good to show some vulnerability and admit that you don't have all the answers, which is why you believe it's best to seek the counsel of an expert. Also, let them know that a geriatric care assessment will only provide recommendations about future care, and that you will not follow through with any recommendation your parent doesn't feel comfortable with. The bottom line is that most seniors and adult children need at least some direction when it comes to making the right elder care decisions. Not having the guidance leads to turmoil, confusion, anger, frustration, and mistrust. But having the right guidance ensures that your aging loved one will have all the resources needed to maintain the quality of life they deserve, so you can enjoy the holidays and your remaining years with them. Dealing with elder care guilt during the holidays. Part 6. Burnout. When there is a lack of information or lack of a proper elder care plan in place, it will ultimately lead to burnout. Because there is no clear guidance, direction, or expectation of what will happen next, the aging senior and the caregiver become distressed and eventually burn out. This situation is particularly common when the elder caregiver is a family member, though it can happen in instances with professional caregivers as well. Burnout is bad for both the caregiver and the senior receiving the care. The quality of care drops significantly, sometimes even to the endangerment of the patient, and the health of the caregiver deteriorates at the same time. Common signs of burnout. Burnout is not always easy to spot. Sometimes we experience temporary bouts of stress and just need a little extra rest or time away to get us back to normal. But when these short breaks are not doing the trick, then burnout may be setting in. Here are some things to look for to determine if this is occurring in your situation. Problems sleeping. Continual exhaustion, even after sleep or having a break. Low levels of energy. Trouble with focus, concentration on your job. Impatience, irritability, and overreactions to minor problems. Lack of an outside life. Feelings of resentment. Increasing susceptibility to colds, flus. New or deteriorating health conditions. Feelings of hopelessness or helplessness. If you are experiencing these or similar symptoms, it's time to get some help. Many family caregivers put on a brave face and determined to persevere even when things get difficult. After all, these are your parents, and they took care of you even when things weren't always easy, right? This may be true, but continuing things as normal, even when you are showing signs of burnout, is not good for anyone. Not only is it likely to adversely impact the health of you and your aging parent, but it will also put a major strain on your relationship. These are supposed to be their golden years, and you are supposed to help them enjoy these years, not make things more stressful. There is no shame in asking for help when you need it, and in the long run, everyone will be better off in the process. Options for burnout relief. When you are burnout from caring for a loved one, or they are burnout having you care for them, it's time to step away for a time. Assuming you want your loved one to stay at home and not to go into a nursing facility, you have a couple of options. 1. Ask other family members for help. Sometimes the burden of elder care falls on the shoulders of one member of the family simply because they are too afraid to ask others for help. Sure, your siblings may have busy lives, but is it possible for one or two or more of them to pitch in and provide you at least some relief, like even a day or two a week? Most people, if they are committed, can find an extra couple hours in their weekly schedule to help out with mom and dad. Of course, if all your family members live out of town, this may not be a viable option. 2. Respite care. If no one in the family can help, another option is respite care from an in-home senior care agency. Respite care can be tailored around your needs and budget. Whether you need someone to relieve you once a week or just need a few weeks off, they can set up a plan for you. And maybe you can get your family members to at least help out in paying for respite care for your aging parents. Burnout is a condition that will put major stress on the family relationships during the holidays and throughout the year. Taking steps to avoid it and address it when it happens will make your family relationships much healthier. Dealing with elder care guilt during the holidays, Part 7, Isolation. Isolation is a major source of elder care guilt and one that results from a failure to take advantage of outside resources to secure the level of quality care your aging loved one deserves. A common example is a senior living at home alone with one or two family nearby. Rather than put together a comprehensive care plan, they agree to check up on mom once in a while. Well, once in a while is a relative term, and usually it becomes less frequent over time. This leads to the parent feeling isolated and abandoned, which can adversely affect their health in numerous ways. The U.S. Census Bureau reported in their 2010 census that roughly 11 million seniors live by themselves. This figure represents 28% of the age 65 and older population. With so many seniors living alone, it is no surprise that more and more feel lonely and isolated. But it doesn't have to be this way. Just taking a few simple steps can remove the isolation and help your aging parent reconnect with society. Here are some ways to accomplish this. Number 1. Assess your parent's living situation. If your mom or dad is feeling lonely or isolated, they are not likely to admit this to you. You will have to read between the lines to determine if this is the case, and it starts by looking at their living situation. Does your parent come in regular contact with others? Do they have a way of getting around? Can they still go out and shop for groceries and other essentials? Do they have friends that live nearby? Sometimes the best thing is to change something about the living situation. Many options exist, such as moving them in with you or a sibling moving in with them, hiring a caregiver for compassionate care, or just scheduling regular weekly visits so you and your kids can stay connected with them. 2. Assess your parents' interest. Sometimes your parents don't know all the ways available to them to interact with others in their own age group. It may be up to you to think about what they are interested in and point them towards social activities that will feed these interests. For example, if your dad likes to play chess, find a local chess club where he can play on a regular basis and make sure he has a way to get there. If your mom is an animal lover, get her a dog or a cat, if she is allowed, so she will have a constant companion when no one else is around. Then help her join a club with other animal lovers, so she can get together with like-minded people on a regular basis. 3. Leverage the power of the Internet. A growing number of elderly are getting connected to the Internet, and for good reason. With social networks like Facebook out there, it is easier to keep up with the lives of their children and grandchildren. If they don't already know, teach them the basics at least on how to access the web and what's available to stay in contact with their loved ones. The cure for isolation and other sources of elder care guilt really comes down to demonstrating to your parents that you genuinely care about their well-being during their golden years. By seeking the proper guidance and having an effective plan in place, you can ensure that your aging loved ones will have everything they need to live an optimal retirement. This will help overcome the elder guilt you may be feeling and help you enjoy the holidays with the ones you love. 8 strategies for freedom from caregiver guilt. Strategy number 1. Identify. We have seen thus far that there are several things that can cause elder care guilt. We have looked at 7 primary drivers and what to do to overcome each one specifically. Now we want to look at 5 additional strategies that can be used to overcome not only elder care guilt, but feelings of general guilt about anything in your life. Identify the source of your guilt. Feelings of guilt can arise when we least expect them, and often We don't even know the root cause. This is especially true in our relationship with our senior parents. Sometimes our guilt might be related to something that happened 30 years ago and has nothing to do with their current living situation. Parents are notorious for putting guilt trips on their kids. It might not even be what they say directly, but simply what they seem to convey by their actions and responses. Here are some examples of what parents communicate to their children about the past that cause guilty feelings. You never relied on my advice. You made poor career choices. You married the wrong person. You embarrassed me by your behaviors. Many more. Do any of these sound familiar? At the very core, all these statements are saying one thing in particular. You let me down. Now we all have an inherent desire to please our parents, so when we hear them, or feel them, saying we let them down, it can trigger guilt. So the first step in overcoming the guilt you are feeling is to find out the real source of it. It could be that the things they are saying to you now, such as, it would be nice if you called more often, or it seems like you're too busy right now, are triggering guilty feelings that are rooted much further in the past. Here is how to identify guilty feelings from long ago. 1. Take a trip down memory lane. Grab a journal and get ready to write down some important stuff from your past. It is ideal to be alone and in a place you can't be disturbed for this exercise, because it may bring back some heavy emotions, and you may even feel like crying. It's okay to cry, get angry, or even laugh if that is what your memories compel you to do. This is all part of the healing process. So to begin, close your eyes and bring your mind back to past events involving your parents. Go as far back as you can recall. Remember the things they said to you and how they made you feel. Then write it all down in your journal. 2. Keep a journal for 8 weeks. For the next 2 months, keep a journal of when you feel these feelings of guilt and what triggers them. By the end of this time, you will have a very good idea of why you feel guilty in the first place, and what is happening on a regular basis to bring these guilty feelings back to the surface. Strategy number 2. Were your actions wrong? Another strategy to overcome elder care guilt is to understand that guilt does not always equate to wrongdoing. Looking back at guilt that has been buried in the past, were the decisions you made that triggered the guilt really wrong? Children who have a healthy relationship with their parents going into adulthood are conditioned to believe that their parents' beliefs are essentially right. So if you and your parents don't see eye to eye about something, though you may have done your own thing, you still carry a feeling in the pit of your stomach that you made the wrong choice. Here is a real-life example of how this plays out. Conversation radio talk show host Rush Limbaugh is from a family of lawyers. His father was a lawyer. His grandfather was a lawyer. His brother is a lawyer. And he has several cousins who are lawyers and judges. So naturally, when Rush told his dad that he not only did he not want to go to law school, but he wanted to drop out of college after his first semester to pursue a career in radio, his father was not pleased. For years, Rush struggled with seemingly dead-end radio jobs, and even left radio for a while in the late 1970s and early 1980s to work in the marketing department for the Kansas City Royals. In 1984, he finally got his big break when he was offered an opportunity to do a political talk show in Sacramento. His show went national in 1988, and today is syndicated on over 600 radio stations nationwide. As Rush tells it, his dad never understood why he wanted to go into radio, and he did not realize how successful he'd become until he appeared as a guest on ABC's Nightline with Ted Koppel. Now I'm sure for many years Rush doubted the career choice he was making, and may have felt guilty for letting down his dad. But was it really the wrong choice for him? Well, if you don't agree with his politics, you may wish that he had never gone into radio. But there is little doubt that he is very good at what he does. He loves doing it, and makes a very good living doing it. So what about your life choices, especially the ones your parents disagreed with? Did they think you went to the wrong college, or married the wrong person? Were these choices really wrong for you? Maybe or maybe not. But right or wrong, this is the path you chose, and there is no point in feeling guilty over it now. Now let's look at what happened today. Are you feeling guilty about the elder care decisions you've made for your parents? For example, you may have hired an in-home caregiver to take care of your aging parent rather than taking care of him or her yourself. The guilt may be that you are abdicating your responsibility and spending more money on their care than you should. But are you actually really wrong? What if you have a full-time job and a family of your own to care for? What if you have no caregiving training or skills whatsoever? In these instances, would your parents really be better off if you were the caregiver? What we're going for here is a paradigm shift in how you view the circumstances. In other words, take an honest, objective view of the circumstances and decide if there is any legitimate reason for you to feel guilty about them. Many times, just seeing things this way can get rid of the elder care guilt and help you enjoy the time you have left with your parents. Strategy 3. Address legitimate guilt. So you have taken a hard look at your past, identified the source of your guilt and what triggers your guilty feelings today. You have also discovered, hopefully, that much of this guilt is not necessary because it is rooted in decisions and actions that your parents may not have agreed with, but were not necessarily wrong. But even after employing the first two strategies, you may have discovered that some of your guilt actually is a result of wrong choices. There is nothing wrong with feeling guilty about doing wrong. That's called having a conscience, and without it, what would stop people from robbing banks and killing each other? We have all made bad choices in our lives, so there's a good chance you have done some things you regret. But instead of carrying guilt about issues in your relationship with your parents, it is much better to address these issues head on. Let's use the example of hiring an in-home caregiver again. Maybe the problem is not that you hired an outside caregiver. That was needed because your parent has health issues that require more care than you can give them personally, and the only other option to get them the care they needed was a nursing home or assisted living facility. Instead, the problem is that in doing so, you have stopped coming over to see them because the caregiver is taking care of all of their physical needs. Sure, you're working 40-plus hours a week. You have kids of your own to look after. You just have a lot on your plate. You constantly say to yourself, I'm too busy to stop over and see them. But you also have this nagging feeling that you are letting too many days, weeks, or perhaps even months go by between visits. You know they don't have that much time left, and you feel guilty that you can't seem to find time to get over there and see them more often. So on the increasingly rare occasion that you do go for a visit, there's tension, anger, and arguments, which make you even less motivated to come back. The solution here is to address the problem rather than pretend that nothing is wrong. Instead of continuing this cycle of rare visits, triggering bad feelings that lead to feelings of guilt, take action to visit your parents on more regular basis. Many times, it is just a matter of better time management. Think about it. Even if you work 60 hours a week and sleep 8 hours a night, you still have 44 discretionary hours a week. Is it possible that you can dedicate 1 to 2 hours on your day off to spend with your aging parent? For most people, if they prioritize correctly, they can make this happen. Time spent with your parent is just one common example that can lead to guilt, but the bottom line is, whatever the issue is, if it is still within your control to address it, take action today to fix it and put those guilty feelings to rest. Strategy 4. Stop the blame game. Blame is something we learn at a very young age and is deeply ingrained into the human psyche. It seems that as soon as little kids are able to talk, they get good at pointing the finger at others. The reason it starts so young is that we all want to be loved by our parents, and when we sense that their love is conditional and dependent on our behavior, we fear that we will lose their love if we do something that disappoints them. This leads to developing certain defense mechanisms. Typically, the first defense when a parent accuses us is lying and saying we didn't do it. But when that didn't work, we would turn to blaming our siblings or playmates. We may have also seen this behavior in our parents and modeled it from them. Whatever the case, Many of us have a cycle of blame that we developed long ago that continues to this day. And in the parent-child relationship, there is plenty of finger-pointing to go around. Even today, you may still be using the same defense mechanism you used as a child. So when your parents accuse you of doing something wrong, your mind immediately searches for someone or something to pin the blame on, even if you know deep down that you bear some responsibility. Continuing the cycle of blame triggers guilty feelings and strained relationships at a time when you and your parents should be putting these issues to rest. And while you can't control the things your parents might blame you for, you can control how you react. Someone has to break the cycle, and it might as well be you. Here is one method to help you stop playing the blame game. Change your beliefs about blame. The way to change behavior is to understand what your limiting behavior, in this case blaming, is costing you. Here is an exercise to help you with this. 1. Get alone somewhere for about a half an hour to an hour. 2. Close your eyes and think about all the ways blaming has cost you in the past. How many? 3. Now continuing with your eyes closed, look into the future, 5, 10, or 20 years out, and see. 4. Finally, and still with your eyes closed, come back to today and be thankful this is only an exercise. If you went through this exercise and really felt the pain of your present behavior and the pleasure of cultivating a better behavior, you should have plenty of motivation to stop blaming. If you stumble and fall back into the old pattern, don't panic and don't feel like a failure. It happens to everybody once in a while. Just go through this exercise again and as many times as you need to thereafter until you have eliminated blame from your life. One last thing. This exercise can be used to change your belief about any wrong behavior, not just blame. Use it whenever you need to develop beliefs that make more sense and will help cultivate better patterns of behavior in your life. Strategy 6. Stand your ground. After putting the past behind you, it's time to turn over a new leaf. This is not to suggest a complete personality makeover, but you do need to develop new habits to help you avoid going back into the same patterns of guilt that created your circumstances in the first place. The most important step in making habitual guilt a thing of the past is to stake out new emotional territory and stand your ground. Standing your ground will require courage and confidence. You must have a healthy self-worth and a willingness to give your needs the same level of importance as anyone else's. This will require a paradigm shift in thinking and may take some time to get used to, so don't beat yourself up too much if you struggle in making the adjustment. Learning to say no. The best way to stand your ground and maintain your newly acquired emotional territory is to learn the value of saying no. Caregivers have a strong tendency to say yes to everybody for almost everything, and even when they say no, it is with guilty feelings attached to it. It's time to put an end to this. Start by memorizing and practicing some phrases you can use to politely decline the invitation to help someone. Here are some examples. I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to decline at this time. Thanks for your call, but I just can't help you right now. I realize that you were counting on me, but I'm not available to help you today. Thank you for the offer, but I'm going to pass at this time. You get the idea. There's no need to be rude. There are plenty of ways to gracefully stand your ground. Avoiding the approval trap. Many relationships become unhealthy because one party is afraid to confront the other for fear of losing their approval or losing them altogether. This causes many people to cede emotional territory in order to avoid conflict at all costs. A big part of standing your ground is to confront issues that you are unhappy with, instead of accepting things the way they are. For example, if you are an elder caregiver that has become accustomed to spending an extra hour or two a day with your patient, you may enjoy the approval from them for a while. But over time, you might start to resent how this overtime is eating into your personal life and causing additional stress with your husband and children. You want to lay down the law with your patient, but you're afraid of hurting her feelings. It's time to realize that failure to change this situation will be far worse than confronting it head on. Start by gracefully letting your patient know that you can no longer spend an extra hour or two with them. Something like, "I've really enjoyed the extra time we've had to spend together lately. It's been a blessing to get to know you at a deeper level and learn from all the wisdom you've shared with me. Unfortunately, my schedule will just not allow me to continue this arrangement. I hope you understand." Letting them know you are reclaiming your personal time for yourself, and regardless of the reaction, walk away without an ounce of guilt, because you did nothing wrong. All you did was reestablish the boundaries that were there in the first place. Strategy 7. Brace for fallout. When you start standing your ground, it will no doubt ruffle some feathers. Sure, letting people down gracefully will help soften the blow, but when you start telling people what they don't want to hear, there's going to be some fallout. This is where a lot of caregivers want to give up, because they are often afraid of conflict. Avoiding conflict is a bad habit that is often formed young and is reinforced as it plays out in relationship after relationship. So when they stand their ground and start receiving pushback, they sometimes go back into the old patterns of people-pleasing and conflict avoidance. There is no easy way to overcome habits that have been ingrained in us for a long time. The best strategy is to just do it and be prepared for the fallout that will follow. How to deal with fallout from an elderly parent. If you are a caregiver for an aging loved one, standing your ground may bring more than just temporary disappointment. Your elder family member may become resentful at whatever you are saying no to them about. Parents are especially good at making their children feel inferior when you let them down. This is a card many of them play repeatedly when you get into the child-parent caregiving role. When they try to put this guilt on you, it's easy just to give in rather than risk their disapproval or rejection. You may have mixed feelings about the situation. You wish you didn't have to spend so much time caring for them. But on the other hand, you're afraid that if you let them down, they'll move to an assisted living center or nursing home, after which you would hardly see them, and then you'd feel really guilty. The first thing to remember going into a potential conflict with an elderly parent is you are an adult now. You are your own person now, and you have your own life. You still love your parents unconditionally and want the best for them, but you also have responsibilities of your own. I know what you're thinking. Without Mom and Dad, I wouldn't even be here. Also, they raised and took care of me when I was a child, so I must return the favor. It is great to be appreciated of whatever your parents have done for you. I strongly encourage that mindset. But it is also important to communicate to them that there must be some balance in your life. Let them know that you need time to take care of your own life. Otherwise, you will be overworked and your health may be at stake. And above all else, don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it. There are plenty of great resources out there, such as respite care, that can give you a break without sacrificing the quality of care your senior loved one deserves. Strategy 8. Don't fall back. Learned behaviors can be difficult to completely get rid of. All too often we hear stories of famous people who were alcoholics or drug addicts, got clean for a while, but after a year or two were off the wagon again. The story of Robin Williams comes to mind. Here was a guy that had everything you could possibly want, enormous talent, and one of the best in the world at what he did. Beloved by millions and brought a smile to everyone's face except his own. Williams was repeatedly in and out of treatment for depression, but eventually he succumbed to those hopeless feelings and took his own life. The point of this story is how easy it is to fall back into old behavioral patterns if we aren't careful. If you are a caregiver, you have a gift of compassion and responsiveness toward the needs of others. This is a wonderful gift, but it must be balanced by the need to care for yourself. However, when you have spent a large portion of your life pleasing others and have finally decided to make a change, you will need to be eternally vigilant to keep from sliding back into your old people-pleasing nature. Changing your mind. The mind is the control tower wherein our actions originate. Whatever actions we take, for good or bad, start out as thoughts or ideas. You need to learn to interrupt those thought patterns that lead you back into feeling guilt or wanting to give in and please others for the sake of keeping the peace and avoiding conflict. For example, if you find yourself feeling guilty about hiring a caregiver to look after your parents a couple days a week, and you start thinking about stepping back in to fill the role the caregiver has taken, stop yourself and ask yourself if this is a good idea. Think about the ramifications of surrendering emotional territory you have recently reclaimed. Another way to deal with unhealthy thought patterns is to simply change the subject. When you feel old, guilty feelings coming in, say to yourself, "That's not me anymore," and move on to thinking about something else. The main thing is to be prepared. Be aware that old thoughts and feelings may resurface again at some point. This does not make you a failure. It just makes you normal. And even if you give in to these feelings a time or two, you're still not a failure, because you have made remarkable progress from where you once were. Bottom line, choose yourself. Choose to take care of yourself and nurture your healthy relationships. The healthier you are, the better you can care for others. It's all about striking the right balance and keeping from falling back into the guilt trap. Background. Peter Mangiola combines the compassionate care of a registered nurse with the knowledge of a successful business owner. Mr. Mangiola has served as client quality director with a number of senior caregiver companies in New Jersey. He has spoken before numerous groups and health organizations, such as Redeemer, Health South, Rosemont, and special guest on radio, where he offered personalized health care and advice to seniors and their families. Peter Mangiola, a registered nurse, received his degree from the University of Pennsylvania School of Nursing in 1980, and has since served in emergency, recovery, cardiac care, and electrophysiology departments, including 3 years as the oncology director and 8 years as charge nurse for a cardiovascular nursing unit. Mr. Mangiola worked with several major hospitals as a traveling registered nurse, including Temple University Hospital, Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, the Hospital of the University of Pennsylvania. Patient advocacy. Peter Mangiola combines his medical skill with a passion for patient advocacy. His 3+ decades of dedication reflects his never-ending pursuit of better patient care solutions for New Jersey's senior population. Having endured years of recovery from a car accident as a child, he understands from the patient's perspective the importance that compassion, care, and quality have upon the patient's recovery time and sense of well-being. His lifelong association with the healthcare system allows him to provide expert advice to patients and point them towards the most effective solutions for their specific needs. Topics and areas of interest: health habits and heredity, how to cheat Father Time, the new health laws and what they mean for our parents, what Gen Y and millennials need to know about healthy aging, how we become old, unlearning the habits that make us inflexible, the 7 causes of senior guilt. To book Peter Mangiola for your event or organization, please email petermangiola@icloud.com or call him at 215-284-7618. Topical speaking categories. I have been a licensed medical professional spanning 4 decades. My knowledge of the subject matter alleviates my audience's game and delivering a memorable and life-changing experience. I schedule a personal phone consultation with you prior to your event so we can clarify the topics, logistics, and interest affecting your audience and their constituents. I collaborate with you to get the word out about the event. I will post on both our website, blog, and Twitter accounts the information about your event. I will make sure that they have written and printed materials to review after the presentation. I will provide a custom resource page exclusively created for your attendees. It will include the slides I used in the presentation, along with the links to books, articles, and other resources I believe will be helpful. Topical speaking categories include Alzheimer's, dementia, and Parkinson's disease, asset protection and financial management, cancer care, caregivers' challenges, communication through the generations, diabetes, elder care at home, elder law, end-of-life issues, fitness, geriatrics, home care solutions, home health care and palliative care, home health modifications, senior housing solutions, incontinence issues, integrative medicine, live-in care, managing Medicare, memory care, mobility issues, nutrition know-how, quality of life, safety and hospitalization concerns, senior health care, senior medical issues, senior transitions. This has been the 7 Causes of Caregiver Guilt, written by Peter Mangiola, narrated by Troy McElfresh. Copyright 2015 by Peter Mangiola. Production copyright 2015 by Global Publishing Group.